The beauty of this episode is it's everything you shouldn't do when trying to do something creative. I just wanted it to be a conversation, and there's just a camera over the shoulder.
Accept that there's people that are going to be better than you at that specific thing. So I know there's going to be someone that's better at editing.
You know, and you can sit around and say, well, I haven't started on the main script because I'm waiting for to be inspired, right? When you show up and you sit down and you go to your spot, the inspiration does come.
If I don't put my skin in the game, shed a bit of blood, how could I expect for the return I'm hoping for to be as severe as the sacrifice?
A lot of people will be like, I could never do, I have no idea how to do, and I didn't either, for the most part. It's just sitting down and taking the time to learn it once, and then when you do, it's like, oh my gosh.
Can we just start by acknowledging how wonderful this weather has been? I live in Arizona, and the weather's been beautiful recently. I've been windows down even when it's like 93, and I think there's people who are like, 93 windows down, you're insane. I don't know if you know what 93 feels like when you've experienced nothing but like 110 for months. It's amazing. It's all about perception, right? Going into, this episode's about preparing for creative flow state, just getting into that mindset. In this episode, I tasked Gemini with doing deep research into how better to get into creative flow state and how to best prepare to be in that mindset and how you can maybe trigger it. This came from the idea that I once, and I talked about it on a previous episode, but I once thought, going all the way back to college, I had this great idea when I saw a bunch of gum at the store, and there was 10 different flavors of just mint, right? There's spearmint, cool mint, peppermint, wintergreen, all that, right? With all that, I had the idea because I was in one of the harder classes. It was the class with the biggest dropout rate at NAU, or second biggest. Organic chemistry is always the first biggest. But this was number 2. And I was like, I'm going to pass this class, and I'm going to pass it the way I pass classes, which is not giving a crap and just kind of showing up and not doing homework or, in excess of what I deem necessary, which is a terrible choice. Don't do that. If you want the tips for how I'm cooking this chicken, olive oil, salt, pepper, generally garlic powder. I don't have garlic powder, so I put some chicken seasoning on it. Chicken seasoning from Montreal or something like that. And then put it on parchment paper, put it in the oven for 25 minutes at 425. Comes out perfect every time. Back to the story. So I was doing this class, and I was worried about, cheers. I was worried about not getting it done, or not passing, right? I was worried that these terrible habits that I had created in undergrad or in high school and the continued in the previous year were going to continue onward, and I was going to be in the same place as I always am, where I'm going to have to retake this class or, really get it together at the last minute, and ultimately it did end up happening again. But what was nice was that, sorry, I've been all over the place because obviously I'm doing a couple things. So when I saw this gum, I was like, oh, maybe this will help, trigger the memory, because memory can be triggered by smells and tastes. I knew this because it's kind of common knowledge, but if you didn't know, that's true. And so I was like, well, if there's so many different flavors, if I buy all these different flavors and I only chew a specific one in each class, when I take the test, if I chew the same gum, theoretically, I'll be able to trigger the memories and have a kind of a recall for that specific discussion. And so that was my idea. And I started doing it. I was chewing gum all day long. And every class I'd switch the flavor, and it's pretty subtle difference between like a peppermint and a cool mint, or a wintergreen and a spearmint. So not the best choice, maybe like more dramatic changes like bubblegum and stuff like that. But then also you like run out of flavors pretty quickly. And so you can only do that like semester to semester. So it would make sense more to just pair like your major with your major and your minor with your minor. But that's when I found out that most gum, all the gum I was chewing, had soy in it, and I'm allergic to soy. And that's how I found out that I wasn't going to be able to continue this. But ever since then, I had this idea of like, how can I create like triggers and shortcuts to like tap into this mindset shift that I need for different like states of like maybe consciousness, but mainly like productivity, right? Like, and everyone understands the idea of like, you should probably not have your phone around you if you're trying to be productive, like not having distractions and stuff like that. Those are more obvious ones. We'll get into that a little bit later. But I always kind of was fascinated by this. In a previous episode, I talked about how I thought about doing it where every time I had a photo shoot or a creative endeavor, I would do the same stretches I would do before my workout to engage like my circulatory system, because my body was already programmed to, when I did these stretches, start circulating better. There's gonna be high activity in a second. You're gonna be working out. So if I theoretically did this before I did creativity, I would be getting more like blood flow and maybe more cognitive ability, because working out leads to better cognitive function and stuff like that. And so it was like a cool idea. I did it once and then I never did it again. And then my warm-up program changed, and I'm not going to foam roll before doing a photo shoot. That's just kind of weird. And so, red pepper. So the plan kind of went out the window on that one. But after talking about it last week, I was like, what are some ways that we can kind of trigger flow state and kind of just really get more prepared and just be in the right mindset to start a creative project, since this is a creative podcast and like I want to do this. And so it's very interesting, because a lot of stuff I was already doing, right, is stuff that I found in this research that Gemini performed for me. That sucks. Baby pepper inside the other pepper. Life's amazing. So, with that being said, I'm going to get into today's discussion of how to get into flow state, sustain flow state, and what to do after flow state. That was a long-winded way of me saying, let's get into it, and here's what the structure of the show is going to be. So, it starts with phase 1, the pre-session priming, and what that one is talking about is, if I pop on up here, well, I guess if we're going to get into it, we should start at the top. This is such a good thing for me, because I'm so bad at planning things like this. So like, this is where AI like helps a lot. And I'm not scared of AI, but it also is like, I don't know. It's very much like so antithetical to what I do already that I get into it and then I'm like, oh, let's go back to the structure. And so I'm going to be bouncing around like crazy, and you're going to think I'm a lunatic. And you're probably not going to stay around, but thanks for joining anyway. Make sure to like and subscribe and never come back. So it wants us to define flow state at the beginning. That makes sense. In the creative mandate, neurochemistry of peak state, yeah, this is going to be great. So, as this research found, the pursuit of peak creative output demands a structured approach centered on achieving the mental state known as flow. Coined by psychologists, not going to read that name, flow is defined as a state of complete absorption in an activity characterized by energized focus, fulfillment, full involvement, and intrinsic enjoyment. The psychological phenomenon represents the melting together of action and consciousness, leading to profound transformation in one's sense of time. So basically, that's what, like, you know, we've established already in other episodes, but the idea of flow state is that when you get so involved in a creative process that you lose track of time and space, and you're just fully involved and immersed in this process. Which is why I think maybe for the first time in deciding to do this, because I just randomly decided to do this, maybe not cooking while doing a podcast is a good idea, but you know, we're already here and I'm already cooking and I'm trying not to slice my little fingies off. I want to keep all 10 digits, right? So that is what flow state is, and the creative mandate basically is that, like, I'm not going to get into creative mandate because I can't see that, and I'm not going to read and cut at the same time. But we've established what flow state is, right? And so once we know that, we can get into why we want to get there, right? So if you're doing creative pursuits, if you want to be a creative person, and I think everyone is a creative person, you just haven't found your outlet yet, so keep looking, and also make sure that it doesn't harm anyone. That's a big part of it. And like, there's inadvertent harm, so don't like be like, oh, I can't do this because I can't sew because the fabric's made in a sweatshop. Like, you don't know that. Like, don't do that much research. Like, I mean, you can, and I think that's an awesome thing to do and focus on that, and like, that's how we're ultimately going to beat like evil systems that are in place in this world. But like, don't let the fact that like you already purchased some fabric and it was created in a sweatshop prevent you from sewing. So continuing on, once you've established what your creative act is, and then you want to do it, you have these hurdles that come up, right? And so, taking a step back, there's a difference between flow and hyperfocus. So hyperfocus you can achieve with a lot of different things, right? So like, if you're like me, for instance, and you like to multitask, like I'm currently doing, you can quickly get super into things and like really fixated on it and just like go into it, and like all you want to do is just that thing, and then you get burnt out and then you stop and then you go on to the next thing, and then next thing you know, your apartment's full of piles of different activities that you started but never stopped. So like, if I had started a jigsaw puzzle this weekend, it most certainly would not be done, and it most certainly would be taking up table space in my apartment. This is not a real example. I know in the past I've said this isn't a real example, I'm just making this up. This is actually one that I'm making up. But my apartment is always a mess because of things like this. Now, that's what hyperfocus is. It's, so the difference between hyperfocus and flow is, hyperfocus is a part of flow, right? So that you get hyperfocused, you get into these ideas. You're fully invested in this act, and you're turning off. It's called hypofrontality. I think I talked about it. I definitely talked about it in the last one. I don't know if I've made an episode since then, but essentially I misrepresented that term and that idea in the previous in a previous episode. So forgive me, but I'm going to properly talk about it now. Hypofrontality is when your executive function of the brain kind of gets shut off and put into autopilot, so then you don't hear your inner critic, and definitely don't hear like some of those things that are just going to keep holding you back, and you start making these decisions just on the fly, and you're very present, right? So that's the hyperfocus aspect of it. But being hyperfocused, right, is just an element of it, right? So like something that happens to me a lot, and I used to subscribe to Masterclass, and in one of the Masterclasses, this guy said one of the biggest things he ever heard was focus on the 2%. And I was like, oh, that's cute. That's cute. What does that mean? You know, like, what's the 2% milk, right? Well, so I just minced the garlic. I have a garlic plate, so I have a bunch of minced garlic here. Look at that. Oh, look at that. Beautiful. So garlicky. Why 2%? And what is the, focus on the 2%? So the top 2% is what the overall goal is, right? And that's so like, most people say 80-20, like 80% of your work goes to 20% of the outcome or whatever, blah, 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 right? So the 2% is focusing on the overall goal, the macro view, looking at the cream of the crop, just the main high level points, right? And then this is supposed to help keep you from getting stuck in the weeds. I often get stuck in the weeds. So if I'm doing a video project and I'm like, oh, this would be so much cooler if I rotoscope this, I will then spend 5 hours rotoscoping something that is just one transition in an overall video that doesn't necessarily need anything to be rotoscoped. So for projects that are just like fun and like just doing it haphazardly and just kind of like going about it and trying new things like rotoscoping, that makes total sense. That's perfect, right? But when you are trying to actively get things done and you're doing a creative project for a purpose, you cannot get that hypofocus going in different directions and getting stuck in the weeds. So that's the difference between hyperfocus and flow. So how flow works is there is the neurochemical reward system in your brain, right? So dopamine, serotonin, and you've probably heard some idea of how this works. So dopamine is the motivation, right? So it basically like motivates you to do work, right? So it's the reward, it's the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, right? So you're working towards getting that dopamine release. That's why we have things like Instagram addictions and drug addictions and stuff like that, is because it's a cheap, a lot of people calling them cheap dopamine rewards. So you don't have to do a lot in order to get that same dopamine that you would have to do a lot for in the past. So a lot of those things like hijack your system, right? And so like you're like, well, I'll just stay here because I'm getting everything I need, right, from this swiping, from whatever it is. But when you are trying to do something of greater value or hard work, right, you need a lot of dopamine to get you through there. So if you like, if you basically like like mainline Instagram, you're gonna have a hard time doing some creative practices. And I'm speaking from experience at this point because I will just fall headfirst down a rabbit hole on Instagram and not come back, and I'll just be like, oh, it's just like a little, like, it's just a little bit. I'm not gonna be on there for too long, right? And then like 2 days later, I'm like, ugh. I seriously haven't done anything I've wanted to do in like a long time, so this is a problem. So now we're gonna get into the problem. Now that we've very quickly and recklessly gone through a very important topic that I have no ability to discuss in length. I'm not a neuroscientist or play one on TV. If you want to learn more about the reward system, Andrew Huberman talks about it a lot. There's some other podcasters out there. It's not going to be hard to find stuff on it, especially today. There's just so much information about there that I just don't need to be talking about that, especially since there's better information out there for you. Going into the next part, right, into the actual creative process, setting up, maintaining, and then what you do after going into creative flow state, which is what today's episode is going to be about. We're going to look at priming, the first phase, getting ready for flow state. In this sense would be if I'm cooking, right, what I'm doing right now. It's matching, the first thing is time optimization, right? So that's picking the best time of day to do that action, right? Forbes, in the episode with Forbes, he talks about how the first thing he does every day is he just sits down, he primes himself by doing a quick meditation, and then he sits, or a walk, and then he sits down and he starts writing. And in the first 2 hours of his day, he has a do not disturb function on his phone, and he works on his writing. That's his creative practice. That is his work. So that's a great example of time optimization. When I wake up, I do this. Hunter said the same thing. He said, when I wake up and when I go to bed, right in those bookends are when I do my writing, because that's really the only time I have time to do it, and it works for me. And so that is what time optimization is matching the energy to the task, right? So one of the things I'm trying to do in my day-to-day job is matching, starting with creating and then doing the busy work admin at the end of the day, because you still have to get that done. But if you use the creative flow first, right, it's a lot harder to motivate because you don't have that dopamine anymore at the end of the day. And we're going to get into that later. But that's essentially, like if you, and I read a book about it, it's called Eat the Frog. A lot of people recommend it in the self-help world or whatever. It just talks about it, like if you had to eat a frog every day, I think this example comes from someone, but it's a really good analogy, right? So if you had to eat a frog every day, you're never going to get used to eating a frog. It's just not going to happen. If you are going to eat a frog every day, what you do is eventually come to terms that, well, my day's going to get a lot easier if the first thing I do is just eat that frog, right? I don't have to wait, procrastinate, put it off, and then right before bed I'm like, ugh, I just brushed my teeth and now I have to eat a frog, gross, or like, like whatever. It's a weird concept, but it makes sense because I think the idea of eating a frog is so... Ugh. Then it talks about, necessity of recovery. We'll get into that in the recovery stage. And then pre-creative rituals. So a lot of creative individuals throughout time have done pre-creative rituals. Like I was just saying for Forbes, going back to that example, he meditates or he goes for a walk, right? And this talks about, here, who is it? Joan Miro would engage in rigorous exercise at 6 a.m. daily, and this would boost serotonin levels to manage depression, and then they could start their work. I do not know their pronouns, so forgive me there. It says the same thing for Pablo Picasso would start late, and Georgia O'Keeffe would start early, and those would be the ways they would trigger it. So like it's kind of like Ryan Holiday talks about going for walks, just going for walks and how important walks are to just like let your mind envelop, right? Or unfold, right? Because it's just getting like knotted up with all these thoughts and these layers of thoughts, right? And so when you do these processes and you like engage this stuff, and so that was the idea when I was like, oh, I'll just stretch beforehand, it'll trigger that same thing and I'll be ready to go. The first idea is priming yourself. You've picked a time of day that works best for that creative activity, right? Or whatever that is. Then you physically prime yourself, right? Sometimes it's cleaning the space. I wish I had done that before I started cooking. But sometimes it's, making sure that area is organized. Sometimes it's throwing your phone off a bridge. Sometimes it's going for a walk, doing something physical. What I like to do to start my day is go to the gym, work out, and then shower, and then eat breakfast, and then get into my day. It doesn't always happen. Sometimes I wake up and I'm like, I'm going to work out tonight. There's no shot I'm getting this in before the day. But on those days, I try to walk. On the days I don't do either, the first 3 hours are a lot harder than the last 3 hours. The whole day just gets so much harder, right? So it's about priming yourself for what you're about to get into. Set up the area for success, right? You're creating that foundation for creativity to be built on. Then there's the doing, right? And so maintenance is part of it, but like also getting prepared. Like in getting prepared, I have 3 minutes left on this chicken, and I'm not even close with everything else. So it's gonna be a fun timing in a second. All right, that looks good. This was the most expensive olive oil I've ever purchased in my life. It's delicious, but super expensive. And it's gonna get smoky in here because I'm not turning the vent fan on because I'd rather have clean audio than not. So we're gonna take this minced garlic, and then I wish I had a different way of doing this, but this is it. We're gonna brush it into the pan and saute it. Okay. And then we're going to swirl it around to just like infuses with that olive oil. And it's already brown because it was so hot. It's stainless steel, so I don't really care much. And I'm going to use this to kind of, like the sauce the tomato I put in later is going to pick up this, they call it roux or something like that. So take the bell pepper, add that. This might also even help, just like the water in the bell pepper might help pick it up. And I learned all this from just like bullshit. Like at no point have I taken any formal training in cooking, and my food tastes like it, but it tastes good. It's just simple food. I think that's the easiest way. I also oversalt. That's a huge indicator of success is if you oversalt. Just put salt on absolutely everything. Okay, so that's going. Okay, so when you start, right, the idea is when you're doing a creative task, right, I talked about the thing earlier about Instagram is cheap dopamine. It's such a simple system that you basically get like into this idea of just like, okay, all I have to do is swipe to like like to feel like desirable or laugh or see something that makes me feel good or see something that makes me feel bad, and then I can go through this, all these emotional ranges just by swiping, right? So now anything that isn't that easy becomes a Herculean task. You're Sisyphus rolling that boulder up that hill. So you have to find ways to get yourself ooh, that smells really good. You have to find ways to get yourself into that area. So one of the first things it talks about is controlling your environment, throwing away your phone, just saying, you know what? I don't need that right now. And then, other devices silencing, don't have the TV on in the sense that like, oh, I'll just put on my favorite show and I won't watch, right? That was one of my favorite trends on Instagram, talking about my Instagram addiction, was that it would be like, oh, I'll just turn on a movie while I clean. And then it's like the person's cleaning. And then it's like Star Wars and then they're just cleaning. And then there's just them like this and nothing's gotten cleaned. And then it's them sitting down and it's like then them eating while sitting down while watching this movie instead of cleaning. Essentially, that's what it's talking about, right? The phones have been described as the arch enemy of productivity, right? They're very distracting. They're literally meant to just hijack your brain. They constantly keep getting more and more addictive. It's something to be weary of. What I'm going to do is put this off to the side so it can rest. This chicken looks really good. It's cooked all the way through. So I'm going to take this. Right. I have a huge cutting block over here, a butcher block. Oh, I knew that was going to happen too. I'm going to take it over to there. Okay. And just let it rest. Because now we have to cook the rest of the chicken, right? But you know what? Like, I'm just doing my best, right? Like, I live here. As you can see, actually, the perfect example is right now. That timer went off, and then all productivity toward this podcast went out the door, right? Because I had to focus on the chicken. I'm still sauteing my garlic and peppers, which smell good but are getting a little burnt. And then like a billion different things came on. So like imagine for a second, if you will, that your phone was specifically designed to hijack your reward system. And then every time, this is not the nice olive oil, by the way. This is cheap olive oil. This is what I primarily use because that was so expensive but tastes so good. So, back to the story. So, let's just imagine that the phones we have are meant to keep us engaged and addicted to them, and that we're not supposed to do anything else that gives us reward that's cheap, easy, or free. No, we're supposed to be just like mainlining Instagram, right? And then imagine that you decide one day that you want to do anything else, right? But you can't because your phone's in the room, and every time your phone dings, you know the ding, and it's like, oh, Tinder, oh, email, oh, Google Chat, oh, my mom wants to know what time dinner is, oh, my dad wants to send me a meme of some cats hugging, right? It's going to be impossible to get anything done. Much like what's happening here, where I'm trying to do too much at once. Oh, yeah. And because of it, my peppers are now burnt. And the garlic is just going. Look at that. It's absolutely torched. I'm going to save it, but we're going to leave that there for now. Cool that off. All right, on to the next batch of chicken. Imagine you're trying to write a book. You've decided you want to write a book. Or you just want to draw. You want to learn how to draw. And you decide you're going to do this at 2 p.m. every day. And you're at work and you got your phone next to you or whatever. And then you start trying to draw, and then all of this starts happening. Literally, watch what's happening in here. If you're listening to this podcast, I'm sure you can imagine from the fact that I'll just be talking, and then I'll just stop talking and you'll hear some banging, that I'm very distracted right now. And this is not the right time to be doing this. But I don't care because, I don't know, it's a fun idea. For those of you who don't know, I'm now salting and peppering my chicken to go back in the oven. And now the Kickin' Chicken Weber, not Montreal, Weber seasoning. And then season it like you want a heart attack. This is going to be really good. I'm really excited about this. That chicken smells really good. That smells good. A little burnt, obviously, but smells good. All right, I'm grabbing the pan with my bare hand, going into the oven for another, you guessed it, 25 minutes. So now this is where it's going to get really exciting because I'm now going to try and cook the rest of my meal while this timer's going, while that chicken's cooking, and finish up the podcast. And you'll really see how hard it is to get things done when you're distracted. You get the premise, though. You get the idea that, like, literally what's happening to me right now is what you're trying to avoid when you're creating things. So, one of the things that's interesting is there's also the idea of, well, I do better if I'm just in a completely, like, noise-free environment and I can't hear anything, right? That's not true. That's not true. Humans actually do better and get into there when they are at, like, 70 decibels of noise. So that's like one of the things I like to do is I like to go to coffee shops and be around people, that buzz, that hum, that just like keeps me focused, energized, and going. And so the it says here that the auditory environment plays a complex nonlinear role in cognitive performance. Excessive background noise is detrimental, obviously, if you're trying to like focus on like writing a paper and you're in the middle of an auto body shop. That's not going to work. However, the optimal acoustic environment in task development research demonstrates that while excessive noise 85 decibels plus impairs creativity and moderate levels of ambient noise around 70 decibels comparably to the sound of a coffee lounge during break, whatever, actually enhances creative performance. Not necessarily turning something off. So like the idea that you're going to like, oh, I'll put on like a movie, sure. That's inherently a good idea to have something in the background that's kind of engaging, but not too engaging. It's not tomato paste. Yes, it's definitely not tomato paste, but it's not. It's so like there's a level to it, right? And one of the things that really came out in this research was that like the most important thing for all of this is that you have like moderation. Again, I think this example is perfect because like who am I to think that I could never have once held a cooking show in my life and like thinks that they're like Mr. Multitask, right? Like who the hell am I to think that I could cook a bunch of food for myself and then talk about something I've barely read over and then do it all, you know, while teaching people that, right? Like cook an entire chicken and then create a pasta sauce and then boil the pasta and put it all together in an hour while recording myself talk about the intricacies of creative flow. But I don't think I'm doing the worst job. So right now I'm filling up water to boil in order to get the pasta ready because you know what? Cold pasta is fine. I prefer hot pasta, but this chicken's going to be done in 20 minutes and that means that the pasta needs to be boiling relatively soon here. So we're going to turn that on high, clear the space a little bit more. And so now that you know that 70 decibels of acoustic sound, you know, like lo-fi beats to study / relax to, whatever, things like that can actually help increase creative performance. And so they recommend white noise in this, but I just think going to a coffee shop if you're going to be a writer is going to help. Being around people is normally my answer to a lot of things. I'm going to salt the pasta water. Okay. Drink a little beer. Okay. This roux is not getting picked up, but you're going to be free of distraction. You're going to be in a neutral sound environment. You are going to have your tasks in front of you, right? You're ready to complete the task at hand. What's next? Well, what's next is engaging that dopamine. theoretically, right, that dopamine system and why it gets hijacked by technology is because you start to get a certain amount of reward. Once you do something and you get rewarded, your brain goes, okay, so every time I eat a cookie, I feel 10 times happier, right? But then what happens is your brain gets used to it, right? So then the next time you have that cookie, you only get 7 times happier, right? And then 6, 3, and then you're at like -2, right? So you start predicting, right, that it's going to make me feel great, and then it only starts making you feel good, and then you're like, well, let me do more, right? So the idea is to get into that arousal state, get into that, like, oh, I'm going to be starting, right? And then it's about, I'm going to turn this down a good amount. So then it's about, right? Figuring out what's going on, right? Because when you first start, it's difficult and you're being challenged, so you're being forced to focus more, right? But then, as you get better at it, and it becomes less rewarding, it becomes boring. So like, for instance, let's just say that I podcasted twice and it was like, oh, this is another good example. I podcasted twice and I was like, oh, I'm good at this, right? This is easy. And then I was like, I don't want to do another one. It's like, oh, well, let me do one while I'm cooking. That'll make it, I like cooking. I like, doing a creative act while I'm doing this will help. And then I get here and it's too much. So where I'm going with this is the next part of this, right, is figuring out where your capabilities lie, and then figuring out, what level of dopamine is needed. Not level of dopamine, but I am full on rambling. I'm going to take it back to the beginning of this part. So I'm going to recap this whole part. So what happens is your brain understands the reward and it starts to predict that that's going to happen, right? So it's like, oh, I'm going to get this reward from this object, right? If I swipe on Instagram for 2 minutes, I'm going to be happy again, right? If I'm going to do this project, if I'm going to start cooking, I'm going to enjoy it. If I eat this cookie, I'm going to be 10 times happy. And then it starts to reduce because it gets easier, right? So part of that is maintaining the challenge aspect of it is a big part of flow, right? Because if you're just so good at it and you can just run on autopilot almost, like you're not, like it's too easy for you, it's going to become boring. But on the flip end, if it's too challenging, you're going to be overwhelmed and your anxiety is going to get kicked in. So that is when it starts to become task management. And so that's what this next part is about, in maintaining, right? So it talks about how people do best when they're at a maximum 10% outside their comfort zone. So that's saying like, not just like, maybe instead of doing a full cooking, like cooking an entire like week's worth of chicken and like creating lunch while podcasting, maybe I could have just decided to like do a little doodle while, write out my recipe while doing this instead of like doing all this at once, or maybe live streaming it, right? So there's something that's like more in the vein, a little bit more to make it more captivating for me in the flow state. And so it goes through this process, it starts talking about this process of like measuring the difficulty and calibrating, right? So like you're trying to assess yourself. Okay, I don't want to use too much. Like I said, this is expensive olive oil I'm using. So you want to start calibrating, right, the level of effort you're putting into things, so you stay intrigued, but you also don't want to overdo it to where you get, get your wits, you get ahead of yourself and you're like, I'm anxious, I'm not going to get this done, I'm not doing well, and then you start getting imposter syndrome, right? So that's like why you start your academic career in 101 classes, not 404 classes, right? You work your way up with something small and manageable. And so that is the procedure it says to go through in maintaining that process. So when you get into the process of creating, you start small. You start with writing the title, writing an outline. Maybe you're, developing your first character. And then as that progresses and that gets easier, you sprinkle a little bit more flavor on it, and then you start adding a little gas to the fire and start increasing that fire. And so instead of just being as again, this cooking is such a good metaphor, because at first I was just baking the chicken, and then I was doing a little prep work, and then I started getting into okay, now I gotta start making the sauce. And then when I was making the sauce, I realized the chicken was coming out, and so then it starts increasing. And then there's a point there where it got so overwhelming that I couldn't focus on anything but this, and I had to let the podcast go for a second. So that was a real-time calibration for this, right? So you're seeing that happen, or hearing that happen in real time right now. But what you need to be doing when you're trying to maintain creative flow is balance, but it's a balancing walk. You're right. You're going in between the two. Something that helps with the structural part of this is time blocking. Like I was saying earlier, at the beginning of the day, I do creative stuff. At the end of the day, I do administrative tasks. That's going to help you even continue to trigger those things that you're trying to do. Man, this is really fun because it's freaking chaotic, and I love chaos. But I also want to make sure this is important for y'all, because I would like this to be good. I'm adding a little bit of balsamic glaze to the sauce. I don't know why. Oh yeah, this was gonna... But some of the things that this is, in more academic terms and in better terms, right? These are psychological traps that come up in the creative flow process, right? So you have what's called the action initiation barrier, right? And so that's what I'm talking about, is if your task is outside of your threshold by over 10%, you're going to be less likely to do it. The further you get away from that 10%, 1%, you're going to be less likely to do it. And again, that's why, Instagram is such an issue, because it's so easy, right? You just hop in, swipe, 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 you're getting dopamine, right? So that AIB, that action initiation barrier, is tiny. But if you're trying to write a book and you think about the entire encompassing, you think about how hard it is to read a book, and then you're like, no, I'm telling this whole story and I'm creating this story from my mind. That is going to be an impossible task, a Herculean task in your mind. So what it talks about as a countermeasure is obviously batching that down, right? So instead of it being oh my God, I need to write a book that's this many pages, you're saying oh, I need to make an outline. And then that becomes easier, right? That is the first countermeasure of doing that, because what happens is you'll start procrastinating when you just look at oh, this is a huge task that I need to get done, and how am I going to get this done in X amount of time or whatever. God, I really burnt the shit out of it. It just tastes like tomato paste with a little bit of red pepper. You start to procrastinate when you think of how tough a task is going to be. If I have to write a whole book, I'm just going to keep putting it off, because it's going to be oh, I don't have the time for it. I'm not in the right headspace. I'm not the right person to do this. Yada yada yada. But if it's just oh, I can outline a book. I can outline any book. This is a book I read once, or this is kind of what I want this book to be like. Right? That comes a lot easier. I'm gonna start crying. This is an onion. Oh God, I hate this so much. I hate cutting onions. Oh. And then we're going to put that onion, it's a half an onion going into the sauce. I should have started with the onion. You're not supposed to use onion and garlic at the same time. I don't care. This whole thing is a train wreck, so I'm just doing everything at once. The other trap, right, is analysis paralysis, right? And so that comes on when you get into perfectionism. And that kind of mirrors that what we were talking about earlier. If you don't focus on the top 2%, you're going to get bogged down in the weeds. Well, the more you get bogged down in the weeds... Should I just do all of it? I'll do all of it. So as you get bogged down in the weeds, right, you start to really focus in on things and hyperfixate and focus, and you go into this perfectionist analysis paralysis mode. I'm not ready to take that next step. I'm not ready to go to this next thing, because this isn't just perfect enough, right? And then you get into this micro adjustment thing, and you're just going back and forth, and it's just constantly just going uphill against yourself. So that's the second trap, right? And so the countermeasure for that is, again, using that dopamine to accomplish small tasks. So instead of it being oh, I gotta get this thing rotoscoped in like, I have to get this transition just right. It's like, okay, I gotta get this transition workable and then go on. Workable and then move on, right? And that is how you're gonna overcome that analysis paralysis, is just like finding small checkpoints and then going from there to the next part and just keep doing that until you're done, you know? Like, sometimes, you know, they say, great is the enemy of good, and like, it's very true. Like, that is something you run into a lot, where it's like, I would have read, Mark Twain is quoted for this, but other people have said it. I would have wrote something shorter, but I didn't have enough time, right? You can condense, you can streamline, you can do all that, but just getting it done in the amount of time you have is also an important thing. Strategy is for just overcoming creative resistance in general. Identifying the pain point, the exact fear or uncertainty that is causing this hesitation. Like, is it too much? Is it too little? Is, you know, what, are you scared of success? You know, whatever the case is. And then determine the, you know, exploring that, like looking through all of the veins of that, you know, like, or all of the different like channels that goes through. And then overcoming that by proactively creating systems and maintaining your momentum and going forward, right? And so like in this case, what I've done for this cooking project is every time I get like a little overwhelmed with talking to you, I just shut that off. I just focus on this thing and I say, you know what, like, hey, you know, it's going to be, I got the magic of editing, it's great, but this is important to get done right. And like, I've botched this sauce. It is going to be good because it's going to be fine. But halfway through, I realized that I wanted to make like a cacio e pepe sauce, not this. And like a cacio e pepe would have been so much easier because it's like, once this is all done, I do it. It's not actively while it's going. So making a gravy was definitely not the right idea. I love the idea of like measure what matters. If you know what the problem is, if you can label it, you can explore the ideas around it, you can overcome it, right? You can strategize against it. And that's what this part is talking about. What's very important is the last step, which is, you know, once you're done, you need to figure out, now I'm adding a little stock of the starchy pasta water to the sauce to hopefully like thin it out, but it's also got like a lot of salt in it, it's got a lot of starch, so it'll bind it a little bit. Right now it's just tomato paste, half an onion, a splash of balsamic vinegar, and 4 cloves of garlic, and 1 red bell pepper. Again, it's botched, but we're getting there. Once you get out of this, right, once you get out of this creative flow state, what's going to happen is your body is going to be like super high on a lot of dopamine because you just did this like crazy task, and you're going to need time to come down. Like, you're going to need time to like get back to regular levels. And the main thing to do when you do this is continue avoiding your phone, continue avoiding technology. And this is where I have a really hard time because I'm really into what's called dopamine stacking, which is what I'm doing now. It's this makes me feel good and this makes me feel good. If I put them together, I'll feel great. And you just keep doing that, right? And that's how we get to the point where we have our iPad in our lap, our phone in our hand, and the TV's going, and it's all happening at once, and it's this overstimulation, like, monstrosity, and I'm such a big fan of it, and it's such a bad habit, but I do it all the time. What you have to do after you get through this creative thing, maybe continue that physical priming, like, get ready for the next thing by taking a walk, right? Leave your phone or put your phone on music and don't check text while you walk, but just go walk for 20, 30 minutes. Like, I did this the other day. I was telling my buddy, and he was like, that sounds miserable. But, like, I was just so burnt out on work. I had been working for, like, 6 hours straight and then, like, had lunch and then continued working. And I was just, like, getting, like, to that wall. And I just said, you know what, like, put my phone down, put my laptop off to the side, and I just sat. And I just sat, and I thought through work problems, and I thought about, you know, how beautiful it is outside, and I just like let my mind wander, right? It just gave it the space, and I felt so much better at the end of that 30 minutes that I was able to get back into work and actually get like some more stuff done, which normally I would have tried to push through and just had a harder and harder time really just like fighting uphill against that, instead of just like letting the current take me for a little bit and then swimming again. And so it's like, instead of swimming against the current, let the current take you, and then maybe it takes you back where you're trying to go, you know? And so it's very important that after, right, you cool down, maybe you take a shower. Like after the gym, you take a shower. Like I said earlier, like I like to start my day by going to the gym, working out, weightlifting, and then I come home and I shower and I cook and then I start my day. That would be like the wind down period, right? Or like before bed, like you brush your teeth and maybe you wash your face, or maybe you like. There was some water on the stovetop, so that's what that is. But yeah, maybe you wash your face and then you have a nighttime routine. You have a morning routine, right? That's the idea, is you're going to want to have a pre-creative process routine where you come down from the high of what you've just accomplished, right? And it really helps you just kind of navigate, like, the idea is that like dopamine isn't like just like a thermometer that can go up. It's something that goes in like waves. And again, Andrew Huberman is a great person to explain this. He explains it as like a wave pool. But basically what happens is you keep adding input and stimulus into this wave pool, right? The waves get higher, but so do the like troughs and the cutoffs. So the more you go up, the more you have to come down. And it's all regulation. So like, again, if you're coming out of a creative space and you don't take that time, it's going to be so much harder to come back. So that's the importance of doing all 3 steps. I did not make it before this timer went off. I'm going to leave the chicken in for a little bit because it has bones in it, so I wanted to make sure it cooks all the way through. But 25 minutes is still a good metric for it. But I also want to cheat a little bit. Like I want to, I'm going to turn it off though. So it's still in there, it's still the same temperature, but it's not adding heat, it's just kind of like resting in the oven. So this pasta is going to be done in a minute. And I just put my strainer over that raw chicken bowl, so we're not going to be doing that. I have my second strainer, tiny one. So in conclusion, right, because I have actually roughly made it through this whole thing, right, the initial part you are doing, right, is you've decided that you want to do a creative act, right? You want to, let me come up with a different example, because writing a book is just so generic. You want to start quilting, right? And you're just starting to quilt, and you've had fun doing it, but you're like not an experienced quilt seamstress, right? But you know how to do it, and you want to get started, right? So you see this video on Instagram, and you're like, oh, that seems cool and fun, and I'd like to try that. And you're like, but that's just like way out of my like level, like my depth, right? But then you see that like it has these other aspects, and that you're watching the video of how to do it, and they're like, oh, if you need more about this specific pattern or whatever it is that you're trying to create, go to this video and it'll show you how to do this specific practice. So now you realize that this is the practice you want to, like this is the stitch you want to practice before you start this bigger project, right? Okay, cool. So you get into the space, which is a good place to start, because it gets into that, what your capability is, right? So you decide, okay, I want to quilt today. It's Sunday. Let's quilt, right? And you go out. Oh, I lost a move. Just one. Because that gravy is such a disaster, I'm just gonna make some cacio e pepe in here. That's what's gonna happen next. Although I don't have garlic, so you know what? I'm gonna continue to use this. It's gonna be fun. It's gonna be great. Let's try it. I mean, it smells a little burnt. It needs something. It needs something sweet. It needs a little sugar. I don't have any sugar within reach. That's a shame. You guys are in the way. So you're quilting. It's Sunday. So you decide, okay, I got to get everything out to start quilting. I'll get my... I don't know if it needs sugar as much as it needs to stop cooking. No shame anymore. Alright. I will be slinking past you to get some sugar. Now I'm adding tomato sauce to the mixture to hopefully thin it a little bit. first and foremost, it's pretty acidic. But second of all, I burnt the living crap out of the red peppers and the garlic. And so, it's not a good start. So you've got your setup set up, you've got your accoutrement out, your fabrics, your fillers, I don't know what goes into quilting, right? You have it out. And you have the overall goal of doing this new pattern or this new thing that someone showed you on Instagram, but you understand that you don't have your full capability. So what you do is you start with something small and you say, okay, I'm going to learn how to do this stitch pattern before I get into the bigger task of doing this whole project, right? So then you start doing that, and then you start getting better at it, and it starts getting boring. So then you start adding the next caveat, the next step, and then you go on and go on and go on until you finish the project. And then once you get to a stopping point, let's say because you're a beginner, you don't get all the way done with this in the first day, and you're not going to get done with it in the first month. It's going to take 3 to 6 months to get through this full project because you are just learning how to start, right? So you go through that process and you come out knowing, okay, you get to the end of your first session, you've done more than you thought you would do, it's been 2-3 hours of you quilting and you feel amazing. And you're like, well, I'm gonna hop on my phone to see if what else this girl has, because I just nailed every single part of this quilting. I made this quilting pattern my bitch, right? Don't do that. You wind down. You take a step back, you say, this was great. Let me pack everything up. Let me break this down. Let me do something that's not a great task, that's kind of lame, so that my dopamine can come back up, right? Because I was just at a dopamine high, and now I'm just dropping. And my mind is going to want to try and get back up to that top, but I got to let it come crashing back down. So it's about, right, riding that wave, going with the current. And so then you go into the process of packing up all your stuff, even though leaving out would be so much better. And then you come back and you say, okay, now that I've cleaned everything up, right, and put it away, then it's like, oh shoot, now when I want to start next time, I have to do all this. No, you don't. You just have to pull out the first thing and start that process over again. And that's going to help you start to go after these more aggressive things. One of the things that also talked about was going over when you're experiencing this, the endorphins at the end, right? And you're going through this wind down phase. You're supposed to think about all the things you did that made you feel that way, right? So instead of your brain having to guess at what made you release that dopamine, what made you feel good, you start giving it inputs, right? So you start saying oh, when I was cooking, or no, when I was quilting, and that pattern was getting a little bit easier, I started adding, beveled. I don't know anything about quilting, so forgive me. Forgive my arrogance. You tell yourself oh, what was really cool about that was when it was like this, I felt like this, right? A little spoonful of sugar, not a full spoon, just a half spoon. We'll see if it needs more. You start saying when I was doing this stitch, it was really exciting and engaging, and that was really cool, and I can't wait to do that again. Or when I was doing this, it felt like that was a little trying, and so that's when you can do that analysis of what worked, what didn't, and do that task management easier next time. Because it's going to be a lot easier to do a specific stitch if you felt like you were good at it and you were learning a lot about it and it was fun and engaging, right? But it's going to be a lot harder to do, motivate to do a stitch if it was difficult. So that's part of the wind down phase while you're packing up, and it's important to do that. And that's going to really suck after this because I'm going to have to clean up all this garbage, and I hate cleaning up after cooking, but I always force myself to do it right away. And it sucks because sometimes I eat cold food, and I don't do it every time. My kitchen is often a mess. I'd rather have clean dishes when I'm done eating and I'm fat and I'm happy than the other way around. So I guess it's a good point, but okay, we're going to try a little bit of sauce. Surprisingly better. Let's see. I mean, it's missing maybe a little bit more sugar. It's on the acidic side for sure, but I did another quarter spoon of sugar. It's a process. Like anything, it's a process. You're gonna have your ups and downs, the ebbs and flows, obviously, and it's gonna be hard. It's gonna be my friend and I were talking about this. My friend just got his PT license, or just successfully got his board exam passed. And before he knew, we were talking about the test and how he was like, yeah, it's kind of crazy that like for a project like that, like for a test like that, because it's like you get 5 hours to take the test. There's 5 parts. The sauce is good. Okay, the sauce is good. It actually tastes like tomato sauce. I'm going to add a little bit more balsamic glaze to kind of like cut it a little bit. There's a little bit on the sweeter side this time. And then I also like balsamic glaze, or just balsamic. This is balsamic. The person who sold it to me said it's kind of a glaze because they reduce it so much. That's good. That is good. Somehow saved it. Okay. And then I'm just going to add it to the pasta because it'll be easier than like doing the dish, separately. So we're talking about how when you take a test like that, that's 5 hours long. It is so long. You have to like condition your body and your mind to be able to be like focused on a task for that long. And he was like, I took 4 or 5 practice exams and like really like locked in my mental fortitude to the point where it's like, for the idea that like I'm going to be there 4, 5, 6, 7 hours, or 5 hours, right? Or like 6 or 7 if you like get there early. So yeah, we talked about how like important it is to like get your body accustomed to that kind of situation, right? Well, this is the same thing, right? So like you're getting your body ready to do this creative feat. You're gonna have to condition your body. You're gonna start by like doing it for 30 minutes, and then 40 minutes, and then 80 minutes, and then you're just gonna keep going up. That's the idea, is that it's not just gonna happen once and you're gonna be good. You're not gonna just drop in and write a book. No, it's about starting where you're at, and then figuring out where you need to be, and then continually just changing that process until you get a pretty solid creative process. And I like to think of it as like a creative ritual. I'm not good at this, right? I'm not good at creating a creative ritual or like a process in which I need to get engaged. And so that's why I looked up this information and kind of created this episode, because this is what I'm going to start doing. Figuring out like how I can create space physically, mentally, emotionally, whatever, to create, then analyze what I need to do to start, and just start creating, like, create that ritual of just like, this is what I need to do to start, this is what I do when I need to maintain, and then this is how I recover from such a wonderful situation. That being said, I have my pasta all together, and then I'm gonna cut up some chicken, throw that in here, and then I'll be good to go. Unfortunately, my camera battery light just came on, so that means that this is about to die. So I'm gonna send this out from here. Thank you for watching, listening. This has been a chaotic, hectic episode. The beauty of this episode is it's everything you shouldn't do when trying to do something creative. That's essentially what this was. Someone once told me, life's full of people who show you what to do. People you should model your life after, and people you should model your life in spite of. You should do the opposite of what they do. That's what the scenario is. Don't do this when you're trying to be creative. But, again, follow the rules. This is something that I'm trying to do in my own life, where I'm trying to create a ritual, create the space, then start the process small, and then work my way up, engaging that dopamine reward system, and then at the end come down. That's one of the biggest things for me, is coming back, right? Instead of just like stacking the things, the feel good hormones, we want to just let's do a debrief. What did I just do? What was I good at? What wasn't I good at? What needs work? What needs less work? Stuff like that, and then get it all cleaned up and together, and then go forward. So as I told you, I'm going to start cleaning this kitchen that I just destroyed. And I also get to, pack up this camera, because I want this to, that is also a creative process, and camera gear just lays around in my apartment all the time. So it's Sunday fun day, clean up, reset day, and I decided to add 6 different elements to it. So I'll be here cleaning up. Thank you for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. I'll see you for the next one, where I talk about something that just spur of the moment comes to me at an unknowing day, because I'm still having a time. I'm still figuring it out. I'm just going off what I need. So thank you for joining, and hope you come back. If you find any value in this all, please just let me know, because I don't know how valuable this is for anyone. I'm literally just cooking, and it's a disaster. So.